Happy New Year. I'm Susan Wingrove-Reed, and it is my great honor and pleasure to spend a few minutes chatting with you about the January 2024 Anchorage Symphony Orchestra Classics concert, Dreamscapes. To open this concert, a composer I was not familiar with, but should have been. 20th century British oboist, pianist, conductor, educator, music critic, and composer, and by the way, female. She was a child prodigy, played piano concerts, and was composing at the age of 5. Her first work was named The Fairy Shoemaker at age 8, and she performed it at a music festival, and her piece was purchased by a publishing house for over a guinea, which would be about $90 today. That's pretty astonishing for an 8-year-old. By the way, she loved cats from the time she was a child, all through her life. She was bullied as a child. Ruth Gipps recorded, "I was revoltingly precocious, regarded with sympathy and horror as unnatural, so was homeschooled for much of my young life." Gipps attended the Royal College of Music at the age of 15 and studied with Vaughan Williams, among others. She became the youngest British woman to earn a doctorate at age 26 and earned a reputation as ambitious, fiery, determined, and stubborn. The director of the College of Music prophesied that Ruth Gipps will go far because she is obstinate. She is damned obstinate. She fought derision and roadblocks and discrimination. She founded 2 orchestras, commissioned new works for them, mentored many young musicians and composers, and was a true trailblazer for people, especially young people and women in the arts. She wrote unabashedly romantic music, despising contemporary trends like serial music, 12-tone music, electronic music, avant-garde. She referred to that as rubbish. Her unique voice is now becoming more appreciated, and the BBC has named her as one of the best English composers of all time, Ruth Gipps. She was not able to submit works for competitions due to her sex. Her music was not played and performed by orchestras because of her sex. So she became not just obstinate, but developed a thick skin and became a fierce advocate for herself and was never afraid to speak her mind. She was labeled in the press as a housewife composer because she happened to be married. Her tonal style was also criticized by some members of the press as being evidence of the natural conservatism of women. She often drew on folk tunes as sources for her music and was labeled as a very much an English composer. Her song for orchestra, which the Anchorage Symphony will be playing, was composed in 1948 and is a remarkably lyrical tone poem, which features some solo oboe playing and is rich with harmonies that pull you in, superb orchestration, a pastoral opening very much inspired by her mentor, Vaughan Williams, with hints of Sibelius and other romantic voices. She uses dissonance, but it's always in a tonal way in terms of the harmonies and the presentation of the score. She has a strong personal voice and claimed that her music was obviously and incurably English. She promoted women composers like Florence Price. We played her piano concerto with Karen Walwyn at our November concert, and also Gipps featured her piano concerto on one of her own concerts. But she had to continuously fight to be one of the boys and was labeled an outsider. The BBC, a music critic, wrote that Ruth Gipps embodies the English music of the 20th century. Musicians like her were the lifeblood of the era, fought reactionary in her lifetime, along with others, but today their stories and glorious music are a breath of fresh air, rejuvenating our music books and our concert halls. An extraordinary woman and composer. Can't wait to have you enjoy her piece, Song for Orchestra. Thank you, Ruth Gipps. The concerto slot that we have on January's concert will feature a work by the guest artist himself, Tim Fain, Edge of a Dream. Tim Fain is an American violinist and composer who was born and raised in Santa Monica, California. For those of you who are movie buffs, if you have seen The Black Swan, 12 Years a Slave, and Moonlight, you have heard him playing in the score. And he was also a co-arranger for some of the music in 12 Years a Slave. It's now your homework to see some of these films. He is an adventurous, authentic voice on his beloved violin and in his music, weaving cutting-edge technology with musical performance art. He has a huge number of ongoing projects in films, TV, theater, and multimedia. His playing is prominent in the movie Glass, about Philip Glass, who is a frequent collaborator with him in live performances, the movie Tragedy of Macbeth, Don't Look Up, and HBO's Succession, where he also has a short cameo appearance. He wrote his own film score for a movie called Munch, a feature about the Norwegian painter Edvard Munch. And some of his more recent compositions include The Shortest Way Home for solo cello, Glacial for violin and orchestra, inspired by the melting of the Antarctic Thwaites Glacier and used by the Sierra Club on an Earth Day campaign, a work called Freedom, which is a short piece for violin and orchestra to support Made in a Free World, an organization helping to end modern slavery, and a 2023 work called Unraveling for 17 looped and layered violins. He was our guest soloist in 2017, playing the Brahms Concerto, and totally wowed us with his wonderful music. And also, he's an amazing human. So we can't wait to have Tim back. He has collaborated with artists like Leonard Cohen, Billy Childs, Pinchas Zuckerman, and a robot named Shimon, who plays the marimba, and with enough artificial intelligence to improvise and jam. Edge of a Dream was premiered in 2021 by the London Symphony, and Tim Fain wrote about it. Sound is my story, and I have much to tell for all who are listening. As a violinist and composer, I strive to make the world a more beautiful place and to give people permission to feel deeply through the music I create. Edge of a Dream for violin and orchestra is about holding on to hope in the face of great adversity. Looking back, I now realize that I needed to express this intense and at times forceful yearning during the pandemic to hold on to the hope of a better future. As I was composing this work, qualities of joy and even elation emerged in the writing, which seemed in stark contrast to the ever-present turmoil and uncertainty which I and so many others have experienced during these past couple of years. Throughout much of the work, I employ several short motifs, which are recombined and reorchestrated as pixels, through which a larger structure emerges as the final part comes to an exuberant close. One reviewer I found online commented that Fain has a career based in part on new music and new ways of thinking about classical music. He performed this piece with our music director, Elizabeth Schultz, with her Maryland Orchestra in October of this season. And one of the other conductors who has conducted this piece in the last year or so wrote, "The piece is really about finding hope amid sadness, holding on to a desire against all odds for a positive, beautiful future." We look forward to Tim Fain's Edge of a Dream. I found it a lovely idea in programming that our music director, Elizabeth Schultz, decided to incorporate a finale of Vaughan Williams' Second Symphony, which is called The London. Part of my fascination and admiration for Elizabeth in this choice is that Ralph Vaughan Williams was the mentor for Ruth Gipps, who is the composer of our first piece on this concert. Vaughan Williams has an interesting background. He was the youngest of 3 children. His dad was an English rector who died when Rafe was 2.5 years old. His mom moved this young family to Surrey to live with her sister, Sophie Wedgwood of the Pottery family, and his aunt gave him his first piano lessons. At 6, he wrote his first piece, which was 4 measures long and called The Robin's Nest. He took some correspondence classes and then attended prep school, was a violinist in the school orchestra, and also had organ lessons. He ended up at the Royal College of Music, where he became friends with English composer Gustav Holst, and he earned side money as an organist at a church where he said he felt totally incompetent. He married in 1897, resigned the church job, and moved to Germany for concerts and operas, and he also studied briefly with Max Bruch. He and his wife moved back to London for 7 years, where he played trombone in orchestras and bands. In 1904, he edited a hymnal and he joined a folk song society, and this became an earth-shattering change in his compositional life. Historian David Ewan wrote, "There is probably no other instance in contemporary music where a composer was a total mediocrity at the age 32 and yet was capable of growing from that age on into the leading composer of his country and one of the unquestioned masters of 20th century music." So Vaughan Williams was doing research in folk music in 1904, absorbed some tunes into his own work, which gave him a path to his own voice. In 1906, he wrote 3 rhapsodies for orchestra, which were folk song based. And in 1908, he decided to go off to Paris to study with Ravel for a few months. Color, nuance, orchestration, atmosphere, and a more direct approach to what you are saying in the music. So he evolved his new and permanent philosophy, folk song as a point of departure. He wrote a first symphony and then the Fantasia on a theme by Thomas Tallis, which earned him a lot of attention. In 1914, he wrote his London Symphony. World War I began when he was 42 years old, and he enlisted in the Territorial Royal Army Military Corps. For the first 3 years of the war, he scrubbed floors and was a stretcher bearer in hospitals in France and Macedonia. He passed an exam for a commission in the Royal Garrison Artillery, and he served on French battlefields then in his 40s till the end of the war. Afterwards, he became faculty at the Royal College of Music. He taught composition for the rest of his life. Never quite in love with teaching, he recorded, but he was inspired by his students, including Ruth Gipps. He is now seen as one of England's great musicians. He loved walking to and from the college with meticulous punctuality each day, wearing an overlarge tweed coat, a usually buttoned up wrong coat, by the way, with a bowler hat that had clearly been abused, and carrying a frayed carpet bag with his books and papers. When World War II began, when he was 68 years old, he was too old to serve, so he drove a salvage truck and did menial duties, but he kept composing during the war too. His Fifth Symphony, an oboe concerto, a Thanksgiving for Victory in 1945 at the end of the war. He was in good health basically till his final year of life. He lived to be 86, and on the day he died in 1958, August of that year, he was working on some new Christmas carol arrangements. Vaughan Williams was wickedly witty, kind, with occasional bursts of anger, said friends. He was serene most of the time and was extraordinarily knowledgeable on a wide range of subjects. He began in earnest the London Symphony in 1912, finishing his version in 1913, but he was to revise it several more times for the next 20 years. And in 1934 was his final reconstruction, which is the version played today. It was universally admired from the first performance. The score was actually lost en route to Germany in 1914, so it was reconstructed in 1915 for that first change version. It was dedicated to George Butterworth, who was a close friend of his and a composer. He was killed by a sniper on the Somme during World War I, and Butterworth had encouraged Vaughan Williams to write this new symphony. Vaughan Williams recorded, "I had some sketches for a symphonic poem about London and decided to throw it into symphonic form." An intriguing program note writer, Paul Suratsky, who I really enjoy reading, described a few highlights of the London Symphony. The first movement, apparently, even back then, London woke up with a hangover. The enraged first subject that you hear, and then a second subject emerges with gentle strings, generates great high spirits, eventually usurped by a glowering theme. There's a coda that leads into a fiery exaltation of the positive. The second movement was accidentally, it was said, described by Vaughan Williams as music of distinctly chilly, fog-laden, and pastoral modality, as Bloomsbury Square on a November afternoon. A simple and astonishingly beautiful set of variations on three themes. There's an English folk song called Lavender that is incorporated in the second movement. The scherzo, the third movement, Suratsky said, "I'll bet that Vaughan Williams came across Debussy's piece Fêtes during his Paris visit. So deftly does his first subject's flickering catch the same mood. A repeat heralds the counter subject, striding like a Cockney Coleman in wellies to be swallowed by the main subject. There's gaslit gloaming at the end. And the final movement, the cellos introduce the first subject, a stately march treading solemnly to an impressive climax, followed by a boisterous second subject. But the movement is far from over after there's a development. There's a vast tam-tam capped climax, which dissolves into the first movement setting that gets us on the road back out of London as the three-quarter chimes and London sleeps. As an impression of London in the early 1900s, Vaughan Williams paints a not altogether cozy picture. Some fearsome passages are all too redolent of the manic traffic-dogged London of today. But as a symphony, well, that's a different story altogether. And I will conclude with comments by Vaughan Williams' wonderful friend, Gustav Holst, who said this was basically his friend's first completely mature work. And you have really done it this time. Not only have you reached the heights, but you have taken your audience with you. And we look forward with joy to going on this journey with Vaughan Williams, Ruth Gipps, and Tim Fain at our January Dreamscapes, your Anchorage Symphony. So again, very happy New Year, and we'll see you in the concert hall.